Hello everyone, this is Ishtar. So, welcome to the Naked Shaman. It's good to have you with me. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to explain my views to you about what's going on the world stage, but perhaps from a slightly different viewpoint to one you may have come across before. I'm always surprised by the lack of vision that I see on social media, in the comments in social media, and particularly Twitter, not so much Facebook actually. The lack of vision, the lack of understanding about how we're being manipulated into World War III. And actually, I wouldn't even call it World War III. I'd call it world genocide. It's not war, it's genocide. And this is the one thing that we don't really, it's the one thing we've lost sight of, is that, you know, we have all these tired old men running our planet who have no vision for our future or development other than a big military solution, as Rupert Murdoch is calling it on Twitter. So he's tweeting out that we need a big military solution to the refugee problem, which is being caused by a big military so-called solution. This is the bit they don't tell us. As I always say, the solution to any problem is found in the problem, in the seed of the problem. We only have to look at the problem to find the seed, to find the solution. But what's happening, certainly these last few days, with the refugee crisis, is that our attention is being put on the refugees coming, and should they come, and how many should come, or should we keep them out? The whole argument has become about the refugees. Meanwhile, we're completely distracted from the cause of the refugees. If we were able to look at the cause, we'd soon find the solution, which is to stop war. It's as simple as that, or stop the genocide. In the Yemen, I understand that hundreds of thousands of men, women and children, not battle combatants, these are not wars fought out like they used to be between, two opposing sides on a battlefield. These are civilians that are being deliberately wiped out in order for the masters of war to pursue their agenda to, maybe these people are getting in the way of their oil drilling rights, which I'll come back to, or their mining rights, which they've given themselves, or, in some way they want the land. That's basically it. And interestingly, just after Rupert Murdoch tweeted that this big military solution is needed, another story came out from a highly credible source, a business news source, which said that he's part of a cartel of people that have just been granted oil drilling rights on the border of Syria and Israel. So of course he wants a big military solution to protect his interests, and this is what they're all doing. And this isn't about countries either. We've got our country in there, in the UK, the US is in there, many other countries. Saudi Arabia is leading the charge in the Yemen. But it's kind of like the people that are doing this are representing our countries, but they don't represent us. They don't represent what we really want. Once again, The Sun put out a headline today saying more than 52% of people want a bombing solution to Syria. And that just so happens to be owned by one R. Murdoch, who's worried about his oil drilling rights on the border of Israel and Syria. So this is what it's all about, and how they create all this death and destruction is by putting religions against each other. And it's incredibly naive of the people that think that it's all the Muslims' fault. Yes, the Muslims are beheading Christians by the dozen, but there was a time that the Christians beheaded Muslims and each other by the dozen. I was reminded today of a genocide that took place in Germany between Christians, Protestants and Catholics in the town of Magdeburg. And the Catholics beheaded more than 30,000 Protestants. And in one single church, 50 mothers were found still, dead mothers, with more than 50, it says, infants still sucking the breasts of their lifeless mothers. And, the violence is not just the Muslims, it's just that it's the Muslims' turn. These religions were created as war machines. They were created, the philosophy underlying them is the literalization of mythological texts, which became the three religions, the three Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They are all cut from the same cloth, but they are different shaped garments. And the garments are armour, are war armour to be used against each other, and purely for that. There is no spirituality in these religions. Let's just forget that idea. There is no spirituality. They are not designed to get you closer to God. They are designed to create war. And it's really time that people woke up to this. People that, when we can go back to the Crusades, or we can go back to the massacre of the Cathars, for example, to find Christian examples, or the Inquisition. I mean, there are endless Christian examples when it's the Christians' turn to be used in this dialectic. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. It's just the Muslims' turn at the moment. So the Muslims are now the bad guys, and they're just being useful idiots in this, and they will be wiped out too once they have served their master's needs. That's what they don't get. It doesn't matter whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Jew. At heart, you are a spiritual being. You're a spiritual being in a human body. You are a spirit that is evolving in a vehicle called a human body. And for you, this life's path is not to wipe out other religions who are no closer to God than you are, but to find your way to God realization, goddess realization, or however you want to put it. Until then, we are going to be seeing these wars forever and ever, amen, because we need, if we don't see through it, they will just carry on. They will just carry on. And these masters of war are so good at pulling our strings, at getting us to think, oh, it's all their fault. They deliberately, it's known as balkanization, because they did this in the Balkans, where you put people like Muslims and Christians next to each other, in countries next to each other, so that there's this constant tension between them. I even heard of, they've started doing it, they're actually making it smaller and smaller. I heard of a prison where they're doing this now. So they've got a red wing and a blue wing in this prison. And the prisoners in the red wing wear red, and the prisoners in the blue wing wear blue. And they're constantly put against each other in a way to create tension. And in that way, it keeps everybody from seeing who's really the cause of the problem. Who's really in control, who's really wielding the levers of power. You can't see them if you're looking at each other. We really have to grow up from this now, because if we don't, we're going to be continually and permanently in perpetual war, and that's the way the Death Eaters want it. Death Eaters like Rupert Murdoch and George Soros and Henry Kissinger and George Bush and Barack Obama. Wow. Well, he's more a Muslim. He comes out more for the Muslims than the Christians. I'm not sure if he really is a Muslim or whether that's just the game he's playing at the moment, because I think he's got a plan for Saudi Arabia. But anyway, none of them believe what they want us to believe. None of them believe in the religions that they've given to us. Even when Christianity was rolled out in the Western world by the Emperor Constantine in the 4th century, even he didn't believe it. He remained a pagan, as they call it. I don't like that word, but that's what they call it, meaning a non-Christian. I call it just being a normal human being. He remained a normal human being until the day he died. He never was a Christian, and yet he insisted that everyone else becomes a Christian. Now, just that one fact alone should tell us what this is all about. It's about rule from Rome, basically. And however they dress it up, we've been under Roman rule at least since the days of Constantine, probably before that, in one form or another. It's not actually Roman. It's not a Roman initiative. There are a mix of different houses, different bloodlines and personalities involved, which I do talk about in my book, The Sacred Sex Rites of Ishtar. But they were based mainly in Rome. Now they're also based in Westminster and also in Washington, D.C. So there's like a triangle now, an evil axis, if you like. They are the evil axis, not anyone else. They want us to believe certain stories are literally true. They want us to believe in a literal Jesus who died for our sins, who turned the other cheek, and who rendered unto Caesar what was Caesar's. They want us to believe in a literal Muhammad who believed in death to the infidel. Having said that, there are far more incitements to violence in the Old Testament of the Bible than there is in the Quran. So it's a delusion, another delusion that is being put out, that the Muslims are more violent. Having said that, the Jews' violence now is hidden. It's not overt. It's in the way they've infiltrated, and by the Jews I actually mean the Ashkenazis, and I think the other guys are okay, more or less. I'm talking about the people that took over the Jews in the 5th century. And if you want to know more about that, that's in episode 3 of The Naked Shaman, The Jewish Problem, where I go into much more detail about it. But the wolves leading the sheep of the Jews are much more violent, but their weapons of war are pornography, destroying the family unit, destroying our sense of gender, destroying everything that we believe in, basically. Another example of this is when the Israeli Defense Force took over Gaza, invaded Gaza in 2003. And the first thing they did when they got there was they took over the television station, and then they just started pumping out porn 24/7. Now, why did they do that? Is this because the Israelis think that we should be more sexually liberated? Well, they're not. If you go to Israel, you won't find that sort of a society at all. I don't think they're even tolerant of gays there, but they want us to be. Now, why is it that they don't want it for themselves, but they want us to be destroyed by it, basically? Because it is a weapon of war. These people have also taken over the media. They've infiltrated the media, Hollywood, television, every kind of media, even the music industry. And they're corrupting us in that way. They're corrupting our family units. They're corrupting our sense of national pride. They're breaking down our taboos, which have kept us safe for thousands of years, in fact. So they're not invading us in the way that an army would, turn up on our shores and say, hey, we're here, let's have a battle, because they're not that honest. They're slimy cowards, and they've infiltrated all of our institutions, and they are destroying us from the inside. So that's how the Jewish aspect is fighting in this war. Whether it's Christian, Muslim or Jew makes no difference. They all use the Abrahamic narrative, and they literalize what was meant to be a mythological allegory, often with alchemical or astrological meaning, in order to pursue their wars. At the moment in America, they're really going heavy on Revelations. And this is quite interesting because I want to do a whole program on Revelations. I will do at one time, to go into the symbolism of Revelations, to explain what I think it means, anyway, from the point of view of a shaman, alchemist, and someone who studied comparative mythology for many years. I would like to do that. But for now, we can just say that it is an allegory. It is not about Jesus coming again. If it was about Jesus, that literally, I say coming again, he'd have to come the first time to come again. He didn't come the first time because that was an allegory too. That's what is not understood. And so he's not going to come again. But even if he was going to come again, at the time that John of Patmos was writing, he would have had to have come within a good few years of that, because the coming was imminent, and it would have been in response to Roman rule, basically, because that's what he was writing against. He had been exiled to the Isle of Patmos, and where quite a few Romans sent their exiles. It's thought that he was probably eating some kind of magic mushrooms, or in some way. I mean, I don't have to eat mushrooms or take any kind of drugs to go into that kind of a trance. So I know what John of Patmos was seeing. He was seeing magical symbolism. And this is now used to take us into war, as an excuse to take us into war. And all those, rich guys buried on Mount Zion waiting for the second coming. I sometimes wonder if all these wars over Israel are just over that, just over getting grave space there, so that they're there for this second coming that's never going to come. And if these people, they don't even read Revelations. I don't blame them actually for not reading it, because if you don't understand how to read metaphor and magical symbolism or alchemical symbolism, this would be a complete mystery to you. For example, I'll come back to Revelations, but there's, this quote of Jesus, which actually confounds most Christians, because most Christians believe that only the Muslims are violent and the Jews in their genocide of the Canaanites. But the Christians believe that they're the good guys. But then when you quote this back to them, this is Jesus in Matthew 10:34. Do not think that I have come to bring peace to earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. Now, I understand what that's about, and it isn't about bringing war to earth. To Christians, it's like they just ignore that, because it's like they really can't cope with it. And they prefer the turn the other cheek image of Jesus, which is just another part of the same story, really. And it's an astrological story. And when you understand astrology and alchemy, you know what that sword is. It's a stage of the alchemical process called separation. And it happens around the time of Virgo on the astrological zodiac, when the wheat is sorted from the chaff. This is what the Virgo sign is all about. But I wanted to give you an example, and I've got a quote here from D.H. Lawrence. You remember D.H. Lawrence, who wrote, probably most of you know him as writing Lady Chatterley's Lover, Sons and Lovers. He wrote some fantastic literature back in the early 20th century. He was a very clever man. And he studied Revelations and studied the background all around it and the source material. And this is his view of what Revelations is. The apocalypse began probably 2 centuries before Christ as some small book, perhaps of pagan ritual, or some small pagan Jewish apocalypse written in symbols. It was written over by other Jewish apocalypse. I can't pronounce that. Jewish apocalypse, you know what I mean anyway. And finally came down to John of Patmos. He turned it more or less rather than more, into a Christian allegory, and later scribes trimmed up his work. So the ultimate intentional Christian meaning of the book is, in a sense, only plastered over. The great images incorporated are like the magnificent Greek pillars plastered into the Christian church in Sicily. They are not merely allegorical figures, they are symbols. They belong to a bigger age than that of John of Patmos. And I think that's most probably true. It rings in with my experience anyway. So this war is going to be conducted out of ignorance, and it will be just so that the rich can get richer and they can get rid of some of these annoying people that are on the land that they want to get to. And it's as simple as that. And yes, the refugees are going to come here. And even though we didn't support this action in Africa, these actions in Africa, we still do have to look after the refugees, because it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about who we are. Who we are not the sort of people to let refugees drown at sea. and get into an argument about whose fault it is while they're drowning. We have to look after them because that's who we are, and we'd hate ourselves if we did anything other than that. And they know that too. They know we'll look after them. We'll let them come in and we'll look after them. That to get into the argument about that, though, is not helpful. What we need to do is to stop them making these wars. These actions are mainly, although we see Cameron up there, we see Barack Obama, younger men, but then it's mainly following an agenda set down many years ago by much older men, some of whom are still alive, like Rupert Murdoch. And they're following an agenda that's outdated, that has no vision for the growth and development of humanity, of the earth. It's a death cult. They are a death cult. And that, to me, is the meaning of evil, because evil is live backwards. So we are a live cult, and we believe in life and joy and beauty and growth and development of our species in harmony with the earth and the stars and everything. And so it's the time for these masters of war to step down. They have outlived any purpose they thought they might have had. Their agenda is rotten to the core. They are hated by most of the people on the earth. I think the best way I want to finish this broadcast with this song, the lyrics of this song by Bob Dylan, Masters of War, because I don't think anyone ever said it better than this. And if you haven't heard it, it's just gold. And I'm going to put a link at the bottom to where he's singing it so you can actually hear it sung. But these are the words, and I want these words to go out over the airwaves. And I would like anyone who feels the same way as me, please, to send this video viral so that they can hear what we think of them, and let there be no mistaking what we think of them. I'm sorry if you can hear the anger in my voice. Some days I just get so frustrated with it all. So here it is. Masters of war. Come, you masters of war, you that build all the guns, you that build the death planes, you that build all the bombs, you that hide behind walls, you that hide behind desks. I just want you to know I can see through your masks. You that never done nothing but build to destroy, you play with my world like it's your little toy. You put a gun in my hand and you hide from my eyes, and you turn and run farther when the fast bullets fly. Like Judas of old, you lie and deceive. A world war can be won, you want me to believe. But I see through your eyes, I see through your brain, like I see through the water that runs down my drain. You fasten all the triggers for the others to fire, then you set back and watch when the death count gets higher. You hide in your mansions as young people's blood flows out of their bodies and is buried in the mud. You've thrown the worst fear that can ever be hurled, fear to bring children into the world. For threatening my baby, unborn and unnamed, you ain't worth the blood that runs in your veins. How much do I know to talk out of turn? You might say that I'm young, you might say I'm unlearned. But there's one thing I know, though I'm younger than you, that even Jesus would never forgive what you do. Let me ask you one question. Is your money that good? Will it buy you forgiveness? Do you think that it could? I think you will find when your death takes its toll, all the money you made will never buy back your soul. And I hope that you die, and your death will come soon. I will follow your casket in the pale afternoon, and I'll watch while you're lowered down to your deathbed, and I'll stand over your grave till I'm sure that you're dead. Thank you very much, Bob Dylan, for writing these words that so many of us, expressing a sentiment that so many of us are feeling and just would not be able to find the words so eloquently to say. I hope this hasn't been too disturbing for people to listen to my anger, but sometimes it's needed, and I thank you for listening, and say goodbye for now. Thank you.